We'll call the Joint Committee on Technology to order. Our clerk will be taking a silent role, and maybe at some point we will approve the adoption of the minutes. Today on our agenda item, we have friends who have been here for several years from the Harvard Kennedy Business School presenting a case study on West Virginia, finding the right path forward. I'll give an introduction of them briefly. Over the past 5 years, the Secretary of State's office has hosted an annual visit by MBA students from the Harvard Business School. More than 100 MBA students from 25 states and 4 countries have been a part of visits here to West Virginia. The purpose of these visits was to offer a look into the economy of our state and to learn the opportunities of the economic challenges and opportunities to the Appalachian region. With us today are 3 of those students and the Regional Research Director of Harvard University. Christine Kung is a native of Los Angeles, and Reggie Smith grew up in Philadelphia. They were both part of the 2019 team visit. Since then, Reggie and Christine have been back to West Virginia 4 times. Over the last 3 years, they have been developing a case study focused on West Virginia and all of our opportunities. With them is Matt Hartsong, a native of Hurricane, West Virginia, a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, a 10-year veteran of the Navy, and now himself an MBA student at the Harvard Business School. Matt, thank you for your service. Also here today is Alicia Dadlani. Mrs. Dadlani is one of the 10 Harvard research directors located throughout the world. She is visiting today from her home in Columbus. At this time, friends of mine over the last 5 years, plenty of thanks for coming again today and presenting. I'd like to welcome Christine and Reggie to the podium and your presentation.
Set up our slides. Okay. Do we need the mic?
Just try to speak loudly. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Good afternoon. Can everyone hear us? So first of all, Senator Queen, thank you so much for the introduction. It has indeed been, I think, 3 years since we first came to West Virginia, Veterans Day weekend in 2019. And we really do want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for welcoming us. Thank you for welcoming us, 2 folks who grew up very, very far from West Virginia. I think, as Senator Queen mentioned, I am from Los Angeles. I had never been to Appalachia until 2019, but really have fell in love with the state and have come back like every year since. You could probably see a lot of images that are familiar. Love tomorrow's pepperoni rolls. We're actually heading to Clarksburg tomorrow to eat more pepperoni rolls. Been to Logan, and actually that was us in Charleston in 2020. And we came to West Virginia with a student, with a classmate of ours, Mo Arley from Parkersburg, and she wanted to bring her classmates home to West Virginia to learn more about the challenges, but also the opportunities in this state. And that's really what Reggie and I have done over the last 3 years. We came here to learn, and we have learned so much. I think many of our teachers are actually here in this room, right there with Mike Queen, Lee Dean, Senator Queen as well. We've learned a lot, and we really, really appreciate everyone for taking time to teach us and to show us this beautiful state over the last 3 years. So we want to start with just sharing a little bit more about who we are. So I am a graduate of Harvard Business School and completed my undergraduate degree at Wellesley College. Prior to business school, my background is in data science, technology, and innovation. So I worked for high growth cloud services companies like Dropbox, but also worked in government where I was a State Department Fulbright scholar based out in China, as well as someone who led economic development for the city of San Jose, which is known as the capital of Silicon Valley. It really has been a privilege to bring some of those skills and those experiences here in West Virginia, working with Sarah Biller at Vantage Ventures to think about how, West Virginia could, capture some, an aspect of the information economy. But more personally, I'm a first-generation college student. I'm the first person in my family to graduate from high school, college, and now get a master's degree. My parents actually left China in the 1950s during the Communist Revolution. They escaped China. And when we immigrated to the United States, we had a Chinese restaurant. We ran that business for 10 years, and that business really enabled, my family to achieve the American dream. I got to go to high school. I got to go to school like Harvard, and I got to come to West Virginia and, bring some of that perspective here. And I think it really is that working class background that made the state resonate so much with me because, I might look different from some folks in the room, but there's a lot of the value similarity and actually cultural similarity. And I think that's really what I felt over the last 3 years.
Hello, everyone. My name is Reggie Smith. It's great to be with you all today. Like Christine, I'm from sort of far away, not as far away. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But I will tell you that I have coal miners in my family, not current day, but from generations up. They were Italian and Lebanese immigrants to Pennsylvania. They worked in coal region of PA. And on my other side of the family, they were sharecroppers in Virginia, once freed from being slaves, and they worked their way into Washington, D.C. and built, a life for themselves. And similar to Christine, I'm also a first-generation college student. When I was 8 years old, I had a wrench in my hand covered in grease, working on trucks with my dad. And when I came to West Virginia, I fell in love with the state because I saw a bunch of people that had similar values: hard work, love for family and community, and wanted to just share and experience everything that you all have going on here. I went to Drexel University, where I got a bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering, worked in energy for 5 years, and then went to Harvard Business School, where I now work as an energy investor after business school.
And this is just the lay of the land of all the places we've had, the pleasure of visiting over the last 3 years. None of this would have been possible without Mike Queen and Lee Dean over there, Dave Gilpin driving us for miles and miles and miles around the state. And we just have some really fun photos we wanted to share. So down there on the left, we got to meet Landell Eugene Jr. We also got to go and see our first ever WWE match with Arn Anderson. And right up there, I know we're in WVU, but I got to put a photo of Marshall University because that was also a lot of fun. And really, we're here to say a few things, right? But we want to start with saying that, we're not from West Virginia, but we've had an opportunity to meet with a lot of West Virginians. We've gone to see a lot of the state. We're not coming here pretending we're experts. That's not what this is about. I think if anything, we've learned we've learned two main things. One is that West Virginians have overcome every challenge they've faced. A big part of us spending time here is learning about the history and the culture of the state. And we also know that, West Virginia knows best how to solve its problems. And so for us, it's really just bringing some of the experiences and perspectives that we have coming from the outside and sharing some new ideas. But we know that at the end of the day, this group here in this room and the communities that you represent, this is the hope. This is the hope for the future. And we're really excited to have the opportunity to lean on this leadership. And so we want to start by talking about this case study. This is, a copy of the case study that we worked on over the last 3 years. We published it for the first time late 2021, and actually it was taught in the case study. It was taught in the Harvard Business School classroom for the first time in March of 2022, and Mike Queen and Secretary Mac Warner were present. And it was it was a really eye-opening experience. For those of you who are not familiar with how Harvard Business School classes are held, the case method is a way for students to gain context and learn about something that they might have no knowledge of at the beginning. And so this was a case study about West Virginia, about the history of the state, and about all the challenges and opportunity. And over the course of 90 minutes, students discuss and they debate those challenges and opportunities. They are asked to be they are asked to wear the shoes, right, or try on the hat of someone from West Virginia and to think through how they would address some of the issues in the state. And they learned a lot. They learned a lot from Mike, and they learned a lot from Secretary Warner. I think it became an opportunity for empathy, but also a lot of excitement. I think that the reception from Harvard was tremendous, and we think that this is going to be a case study that will be taught in future years. In addition to that, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we actually worked with Marshall University and West Virginia University MBAs on an initiative called MBAs Fight COVID-19. And so during the pandemic, over 760 MBAs across the country actually got together to help West Virginia small businesses complete loan applications for the Paycheck Protection Program. And so this is just an example where, folks outside of West Virginia wants to help, and they found tangible ways, whether it was phone calls or Zoom calls, to connect with local small businesses here in West Virginia to help them get a loan application. And just the last photo we wanted to show was, this is a group photo in front of the Trans-Allegheny Mental Asylum Museum. And this was actually from our very first trip here in West Virginia. And Reggie and I are part of the second cohort of students from Harvard to come to the state. And we're really hoping that it's something that continues, thanks to Matt Hartzog, who will carry that torch.
I'll just briefly add, this is now globally available to MBA students across the world who will now be exposed to the opportunities in West Virginia. And that's really the power of the case study. Business schools around the world use the Harvard Business School cases as teaching tools. And so West Virginia is now in the curriculum.
Mike will make sure each of you get a copy of the case, but just at a high level, right, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, the case study covers three key themes. The first is really talking about how the geography and topography of this beautiful state has also shaped the challenges and opportunities of the state. We talk a lot about the history of coal mining. We talk about how West Virginia has been central to the rise of the U.S. as a global superpower, right? Literally, right? Fueling the Industrial Revolution. But we also talk about booms and busts. We talk about, the impacts of the last 10 to 15 years, like what that has done to the state. And we talk about, what the opportunities look like in a world where coal is no longer the cheapest form of energy. So at a high level, that is what we cover in this case. But today isn't about the case study, it's about our recommendations. And so we will talk about why West Virginia needs both big and small businesses. We're going to talk about how you can create a flywheel effect with the information and energy economy. And the last thing is really talking about what an expanded energy economy looks like and what West Virginia can do with its existing assets. And so I'm going to start by just talking about small business entrepreneurship. We were here in 2019 when there was still a gubernatorial election going on, and had a chance to talk to, folks running for governor. And at the time, we felt like the state had a debate between big versus small business. I think we've seen enough of the state to know that some of those strategies work really well in different parts of the state. But at the end of the day, we have to be able to localize the state strategy. What works in Morgantown might not work in Parkersburg, or maybe it will, but a lot of it is just being able to take that local context. And so we wanted to share some data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So at a high level, traded jobs are basically jobs where goods and services are sold regionally or nationally. So a really good example of that is the coal industry, right? Coal is produced here in West Virginia, but sold outside of West Virginia. While local jobs are jobs where the folks who purchase the goods are local, right? So if you go to your local barbershop, those goods and services are produced locally. West Virginia needs both because traded jobs currently make up 1/3 of the U.S. Employment market, and local jobs definitely make up the majority. However, traded jobs wages pay 70% more than local jobs, and so you kind of need the balance of both. And we're going to show you an analogy of how. So from the data, it shows that small businesses account for it's 99.7% of firm employment. And it's actually 53% of total private sector employment. So small businesses will always matter, no matter where you are in the state. Small businesses are important because it allows families like mine to achieve the American dream. It is an important part of the economic mobility strategy, but it can't be the only picture because you need large businesses to essentially grow the pie. And this is just a really simple analogy that shows that one job that comes from trade, right? So a job that comes from an industry like software or, can actually create 2 local jobs, because when an industry is doing well in the local economy, it increases the market for folks who are running the local barbershop or running the local restaurant. And so big businesses, they grow the pie, but small businesses make sure that everyone can have access to a slide. And in a healthy economic model needs to have strategies for both. So let's talk about what those traded jobs could look like. So I love this quote from John Chambers, and this is a photo of Vantage Ventures just right down the street that talks about how digitization will transform every industry, and for the brave, there will be opportunity. And so one of the things that we're encouraging the state to do is to make sure that as they're investing in economic development and innovation, to create cluster formation. So this is the idea that, right now, West Virginia, there's a lot of states, a lot of counties with really great, localized initiatives, but there's also important to basically collaborate and to find ways to capture synergies. So on the right, that's basically a model that would attract more businesses at a higher rate, because rather than going to 5 different places, right, for expertise on one topic, we're suggesting that counties and states start working closer together to find ways to concentrate that talent and concentrate those resources so investments and businesses can come and capture some of those efficiencies. We also identified 3 things for the innovation economy flywheel. So these are basically 3 things that would reinforce upon each other and lead to a more sustainable economy. So the first is probably not news to anyone here in the room, right? It's about having a skilled labor force. I think President McGee did a great job outlining how West Virginia University is going to be a part of that, working with local employers like Omnis Global and also local colleges, right, to develop and attract talent going as early as high school. The second is about building the buyer-supplier networks. And really, it's developing policies and programs that make it easy for folks to sell their goods in West Virginia. And that, this is one of my favorite West Virginian businesses. It's a company called Love at First Bite. I got to meet the entrepreneur a couple years ago, and she is someone who is a college graduate, but now runs a successful cookie business. She taught herself how to decorate her own cookies, but because West Virginia has a policy that allows someone to make food in their own home and ship it to anywhere in the state, she has just benefited disproportionately from that type of policy. And those are actually custom cookies she made for Harvard. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is just around access to capital. And Vantage Ventures they've been on the forefront of making sure that the startups built in West Virginia have access to capital across the country. We'll make sure you have a copy of the slide, but this is really just flagging the fact that high growth firms and Main Street small businesses need different types of policies and programs. The SBA loan is going to work differently for your mom and pop small restaurant versus going out and raising venture-backed funding. And so we're happy to have a follow-up conversations about what all of these different funding mechanisms look like. But I think what we recommend leadership to do is making sure that they're matching the right type of funding with the right type of business. And this is the slide I want to leave you with, which is about building the next Intuit in West Virginia. Reggie and I had the opportunity to visit Bluefield last year in southern West Virginia and visit the Intuit call center. Of course, during that time, it was during the pandemic, so it was closed down. But this was an example where, at the time of building the Intuit call center, it was intended to create 200 to 500 jobs. We want you to expand your imagination beyond just bringing a part of Intuit back to West Virginia. We have to remember that the CEO of Intuit is from West Virginia, and now he's the president of Marshall. And so we're challenging everyone to think about both like how to build the next Intuit in West Virginia, how to capture a lot of the innovation that's happening in the state and keeping them here and growing this economy. And for example, like 4 areas of investment is around transportation, data and Internet of Things, so connected devices. The 3rd is around cybersecurity, and the 4th is healthcare. And the good news is you're already ahead of the curve. Like these are all areas that are being invested by Vantage Ventures down the street and by other organizations in the state. We just want to basically leave you with the fact that beyond the call center, there's an opportunity to build and keep these companies in the state and to create thousands of high-paying jobs. And now I'm going to turn it over to Reggie to talk about energy.
All right. So I'm going to talk to you about what I call the expanded energy economy. Now, I'm probably going to say some things that you like, maybe some things that you don't, but I promise to tell you what I truly believe will take West Virginia to the next level of its energy economy. This shows West Virginia's coal production for over 100 years, or almost 120 years, and you can see there's been cycles. Recently, we went through a down cycle, no secret there, and the big question mark now is, will it come back? Will West Virginia's coal boom again? And we're all uneasy because this time feels different, and we're not so sure that it will. Now, the good news is that as coal has declined, natural gas has increased. So West Virginia produces, on average, about 12% of the United States coal in any given year, and about 7% of its natural gas, but that percentage is increasing as the gas production goes up, as you can see very dramatically with obviously the discovery of, or the ability to access the Marcellus Shale formations in the northern part of the state. Now, this is the most important chart in power because it explains why the coal is going down and the natural gas is going up, and it'll help give us an indication as well if that trend will continue. So this shows what's called the levelized cost of electricity, or LCOE. And the way you can think about this is if you took out a blank sheet of paper and said, I want to build a power plant, and what I want to know is what's the cheapest electricity that I can provide on a $1 per megawatt hour basis just to make myself whole on my investment. So it takes into account the capital outlay, the cost of finance, the cost to maintain, the cost of fuel, all right? And this is what sort of pops out, all right? So if we move from left to right, you can see that onshore wind is the cheapest, but there's a range. And that range is because it depends on where you're at in the country, whether you have, you know, in the middle of the country with a lot of wind where it's windy all the time, or maybe in a place where it's less, you have less wind resource, et cetera. And if we move, you can see wind, tracking, photovoltaic, that's the PV. Tracking just means the solar panels move with the sunshine throughout the day. Fixed PV, where it's just fixed. And then you see offshore wind, that's pretty high. And then the first one there, CCGT, combined cycle gas turbine. That is what is replacing, you can see coal one in from the right, because it's just cheaper. Now, why is that important? Because gas is the cheapest form of firm power. You know that renewables are unreliable. You know when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, you can't use it. So what's the cheapest firm power that we have? Gas. And that's why, you're seeing gas production increase and why the nation is transitioning to gas and coal is slowly going down. So your big competitor to coal is not renewables, it's gas. But that's okay because you have a lot of gas. So you'll see how you can take advantage of that reality. So this just shows what I've already said in a little bit more detail. It shows you the gigawatt decline of power plants in the country per year for coal and nuclear. And so it starts in 2015, the dark brown there is coal. Those are the actual retirements. Then it turns into a prediction in the forward years. But that is what's driving that slow decline of coal, increase of gas, because investors are taking out a blank sheet of paper and saying, what's the cheapest form of electricity? And the first, cheapest form of firm power is gas. And they're obviously doing renewables as well, but you can't do that exclusively because they're unreliable. This shows high level that transformation. So you can see, if left to right again, the dark there is coal, the light gray is gas. Notice as you go into the forward years, gas overtakes coal and coal kind of slowly dwindles out. And then the yellow there, the darker yellow, that's solar. That's what everyone is sort of racing to build. That's the expanded renewable energy landscape that we're looking at, especially as we head 20 years from now. So the question I want to ask is, can West Virginia benefit from solar? And also point out that you will benefit from natural gas for decades to come. And this is a global trend. So on the left, you see gas power plants in gigawatts. To put those numbers in perspective, the US has about 1,000 gigawatts. So this is global, just gas plants. It ignores coal, nuclear, or renewables. You can see globally, we're going to have about 3,000 gigawatts by 2050. And you can see the different geographies represented there. So gas is going up around the world. And then coal will probably peak in the middle of this decade or shortly thereafter, and then start to go down as well. So these are global trends. Right now, there is a global search for energy security. The Russia-Ukraine war has caused Europe to shift its energy supplies away from Russia. It is searching for energy security. India right now has a coal shortage. They're dealing with blackouts because they don't have enough electricity to supply their growing population. And coal is starting to decline globally as well, like I showed, as renewables and natural gas surge. If we just focus on Europe for a second, we can see the market opportunity. So that yellow bar shows you how much gas Europe imports from Russia. The green shows you how much the US exports, and then the blue, how much additional capacity we could send to Europe if we could supply the rest of the need. If you look at the green bar, that yellow line shows you just how much we've recently been sending to Europe. 70% of our liquefied natural gas, and of course some of that is coming from West Virginia, has been going to Europe. So this is the opportunity for you to increase your production. Of course, it's going to be dependent on you expanding volume capacities and pipeline, working with those companies to do that. But this is your opportunity because gas, remember, is going up globally. LNG is going to be in secular undersupply beginning in 2023. This is from Shell, and what they're showing is that even if you include the yellow that shows the new LNG plan for construction, the blue, which is the demand, is way above that. That, once again, confirms this is your opportunity. And you have 10% of the nation's reserves in natural gas, and maybe even more. Those numbers, of course, get constantly updated. The key is to develop what's called RSG, responsibly sourced gas. This is where the entire industry is going. And what it essentially is, it's a third-party verification that says really two things. One, you're operating at the highest environmental standards, and you've done as much as you can to reduce your CO2 emissions. So if you're a buyer in Europe, they tend to be more carbon sensitive than the United States. They want to know that at least if they have to buy natural gas, which of course they do for firm power, that it is responsibly sourced. And so this is something for you all to keep in mind as you think about legislating and creating rules and even companies that you want to invite to the state of West Virginia. There are companies that are active in the RSG certification process that every natural gas company in West Virginia should have RSG certification. That will give you a competitive advantage against Pennsylvania and Ohio and Texas. That could be something that you can practically implement to facilitate this growth. And then, of course, carbon capture and sequestration. that is an emerging technology, something to focus on that will also enable the industry to continue for years to come, and of course, creating a favorable regulatory environment, which I know you have here in West Virginia. Importantly, oil and gas jobs already have surpassed coal mining jobs. And I believe that these jobs can grow. This is where you will see growth for decades to come. Let's talk about coal. Metallurgical coal, it's 53% of US exports. We export about 85 million short tons every year. It's 36% of West Virginia's production, but 60% of West Virginia's jobs in coal. So the job per ton, if you will, is very high for metallurgical coal. And why is that important? Because steel production is going up globally, and it follows waves of industrialization. So, of course, China has been rapidly industrialized in the last 20 years. The next show in town is India. India, by dollars, is your second largest trading partner, at least it was in 2019. That must continue. To keep those metallurgical coal jobs, to even expand them, export your metallurgical coal to India. That is your market. That is your growing market. We saw the thermal coal jobs, that 40%. That is what is at risk because of natural gas. But you can grow your gas to replace those thermal coal jobs while maintaining your met coal primarily as an export function. Okay? So, bottom line, coal production is declining, but you've got natural gas to replace it. Coal is being replaced with cheaper natural gas. But gas demand is growing globally, export it, LNG, continue that, and then metallurgical coal, the expansions in Asia, the industrializations in Asia, that's your opportunity. So I think your energy job outlook is flat to slightly up the next few decades. That's the good news. So now let's talk a little bit about diving into coal country. What can we do in those areas that are already they've already seen the decline from coal? Can we do anything? And I'll tell you, when I first went to McDowell County, I was super excited just to really see the heart of coal for the nation for 100 years. And someone said that they're working on tourism. And I laughed. I said, come on, you can't do, coal jobs and now we're going to do tourism. But then I thought about it more, and I said, what are the assets that you can leverage to build an economy? And of course, the assets are the mountains. I mean, that's why hundreds of thousands of people went through those southern coal counties, because of the the coal in the mountains. Well, now will hundreds of thousands of people go there to actually use the mountains still, but in a different way. And so what I'm, of course, alluding to is tourism and building up that industry and using the mountains as the assets that they are, but just in a different way. And so first, to do that, I think it's really important, addition by subtraction, remove the dilapidated housing. And you know this, but of course, for families and people to go down there and enjoy it, people don't want to see burned out homes, right? And so that's just a practical thing that I would recommend to make that, to transform that and make it tourism friendly. Increasing the housing stock, we saw Renaissance Village. We know they're working on getting people in there, but housing like this can be important, not just in a permanent way, but also for Airbnb and folks who want to go ATVing and rafting, all that fun stuff. Having housing like this, and I've been in that Renaissance Village. It's very nice. I would live there. It's a wonderful site. So things like this, keep doing them. This will move that piece of the economy forward. So from a high level, the whole goal is here, you have zip lining, mountain climbing, hiking, ATVing, and that feeds this tourism economy and the small business economy. That's what I see as the next opportunity there in those southernmost coal counties. The picture on the right there is a building that's actually going to be used for ATV maintenance. It's going to house ATVs and maintain them. Someone's buying them for that purpose. So we're starting to see it, and just we would like to see more of that and continue to focus investment in that. So turning it into a premier destination for outdoor fun activities, that's the goal. And so we think removing blight, increasing the housing, those things, keep doing those things. It will pay off in the long run. The mountains are beautiful. They're very steep. Tons of things you can do with those. They're unique on the East Coast. Continue to leverage that in the small business economy that will build around it. That is your biggest opportunity there to replace those coal jobs, or supplement really those coal jobs. Okay, solar. I understand you might be skeptical. How can West Virginia benefit from solar? All right, this is a new opportunity. There's some more investigation we need to do around this, but I want to give you some quick background. This is the solar supply chain. Left to right, you take sand or quartz, you heat it up, and you create what's called metallurgical silicon. You heat it up some more and purify it, you create polysilicon. Then you melt it and create what's called an ingot. It's just a big rod. Then you cut it and you create wafers. You package those wafers, or I'm sorry, you put metal around those wafers to create a cell so they can transport electrons. And then you package those cells together to create modules. Okay. Notice China dominates every part of the supply chain, particularly in the polysilicon step. It's actually 80%. This is from 2019. They're growing there, all the way up to the wafers, where 97% flows through China. Now, why is that? That's because China has a lot of cheap labor, which unfortunately they're supplementing with slave labor using the Uyghur people in Xinjiang. Xinjiang province of China is the furthest west, or the westernmost province of China, where there's 12 million Uyghur people that are being enslaved in internment camps like this. And the folks, after they're in the camps, go and work in the solar supply chain. Now, they also are using cheap coal to produce in these high energy processes. Well, West Virginia has a lot of cheap coal. And what they're also, of course, vertically integrating the supply chain to get efficiencies. So what's happening globally in solar right now is the United States government is banning solar products from Xinjiang. So that means polysilicon and metallurgical silicon, those first two pieces of the supply chain, have to come from the United States or Europe. Okay. Now, the companies that produce the wafers forward are what we call bifurcating their supply chain. So they're creating a separate supply chain in Southeast Asia, or maybe even here in the US, to feed the US market. And then they're having a separate supply chain to continue to supply China, where, of course, or other countries that are not concerned with forced labor. So what that means is there's now companies here in the US, like Hemlock in Michigan, that are looking for metallurgical silicon to supply the US solar market, which is expected to just increase from here. We saw that earlier, and I'm showing you that again here with these yellow bars. And they're likely to have to increase production. And so West Virginia has a lot of sand, okay, and they have a lot of energy. And that's essentially what you need to create metallurgical silicon and polysilicon. So you could create another mining operation here for sand, or enhance the mining operation for sand, enhance the affordable energy use that you already have here. So you're supporting your natural gas, you're supporting your coal industries, and producing inputs to solar. And by the way, this can be shipped globally. It doesn't just have to be used here in the US. And it keeps West Virginia at the center of energy. That's the important part. Okay, quick quiz question for you. To 2030, what are the fastest growing jobs in the US? Does anybody want to guess? Anybody? Information technology, okay? Healthcare? Okay, let's see. So this is right off the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So healthcare is there. That's fourth, nurse practitioners. But number 2, this might surprise you, wind turbine service technician. And number 5, solar installer. But I really want to focus on that number 2. And can West Virginia get those jobs? Okay. And notice they, on average, pay $56,000 a year. So it's a good job. So how can we turn wind power into prosperity and support your existing industries here? So West Virginia is a very mountainous state, which means it, with height rise, take you back to maybe your high school weather class, increases in elevation, closer to the jet stream, more wind. And wind is what you need for wind turbines. So that graph shows you where you see the darker shades, the oranges, that's your wind resource. And you have a lot of it here. And you're only scratching the surface. You have 742 megawatts of wind. You have up to about 70,000 megawatts. Now, you don't have to do all that, and it'd be very hard to do all that. But if you did, you increased it 10 times. For every 100 megawatts, you produce 7 to 11 full-time jobs. Of course, many of those being the wind service technician job. Now, importantly, this supports steel, because 70% of a wind turbine is steel. It supports your construction. So in addition to that 7-Eleven full-time, these are large construction projects that require hundreds of jobs temporarily during construction. But if you keep building them, they're essentially full-time. And it also supports your concrete industry. And it supports building out a supply chain to make all the electric motors and all the parts and pieces to maintain. And it increases your property tax revenues. So wind, I think, is a massive opportunity for the state of West Virginia. And I feel a little bit like a TV infomercial, but there's more and it gets even better. Oh, wow. We're running out of time. So what this also does is make West Virginia attractive for corporates to come to the state. Every corporate in America wants to buy clean energy. Toyota buys your most energy from your most recent project, 200 million investment, BlackRock Wind, right? That's just an example. There's plenty of these across the country. So when you think about attracting corporates, this is your strategic play, and you have plenty of wind energy, unlike other states. You can also ship this wind energy to the East Coast, unlike wind energy in the middle of the country that is cut off because the grids aren't connected. So this is a big opportunity for you. That's just what I want to highlight. For your other industries, keep pushing forward, doing what you're doing. You have a low tax regime to attract corporations. We think bilateral engagements, getting CEOs in a room and saying, come to West Virginia, here's what we offer. That's your most effective play there. And then think holistically. Think about investing in education to support the workers and their families and executives and their families as they come to West Virginia. So think holistically about not just bringing the corporates here, but also the infrastructure that they're gonna want. So in conclusion, the future is West Virginia. We've highlighted all the opportunities from the digital economy, cybersecurity, the high tech, computer science, data science, all the way down to the coal miner and his job and how that will grow and change over time. And so we see the opportunity that you have here in West Virginia is you can touch every piece of the global economy, from a high level corporate to sand mining. And that's really what you have and what we see you expanding over time. And we're just so thankful to be with you to show you the vision that we see for the state. And ultimately, we know that it comes down to good leadership. And you all are the leaders that are going to take all the information you know best, and you have the tools and the insights to really continue to push this state forward to the next level. And we're excited to help in any way that we can and contribute in any way that we can. So thank you very much for having us here today.
Questions? We have about 10 minutes. Questions for Christine or Reggie? Questions? Delegate Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for the presentation. You touched on a few times that was kind of a bird's eye view of the vision as you see it. And I'm thinking specifically, you talked about the sand mining, which I find particularly intriguing. Do you have any policy prescriptions that would speed up such an industry in West Virginia? Or is it just, hey, at some point this will happen and that's what we have to look forward to? Thank you.
I think the first step. Thank you. And the question was for sand mining and being involved in the solar supply chain, how can that be facilitated through policy? I believe the first step will be in your corporate strategy as you look to attract corporates is to let them know about the abundant sand resource that you have and the abundant affordable energy that you have. When I see the plants that are in Michigan, Texas, and Tennessee, I don't see any reason why a plant shouldn't be here in West Virginia. There could also be some technological advancement that happens if one of those corporates come where you could become more vertically integrated. But I think first, reaching out to a company like Hemlock. There's also another one called Rec Silicon. That's the one in Texas. Tennessee is a company called Wacker. And showing them the opportunity that they have here in West Virginia.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions? Doug Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think this one will be for Christine. On one of your slides, you sort of demonstrated that flywheel effect that you were hoping to see for the state. And one of the, I'll give you a second to pull that back up.
Last slide.
Oh yeah, no, you're fine. You got there fast, didn't even go past it. That's beat me at it. So the access to capital, right? And I know that you've done some work with Vantage Ventures, which I think is incredible. But from a governmental standpoint, and Delegate Williams began to sort of go down this path, but what is it that we can do on a state level to improve access to venture capital? And I say that because we're ranked very, very often, fairly low in access to capital for small businesses.
So I used to work for Silicon Valley, which is ranked #1 for venture capital. And a lot of it has to do, flywheel effect, it really has to do with the slide. And I apologize, we didn't have enough time to go deeper into it, but a lot of it has to do with geography. If you look at the slide, if you look at the image on the left, that kind of looks a little bit more like the West Virginia innovation ecosystem, right? Where there's a lot of amazing work happening in Bluefield, but it's unclear if any of the opportunity or sort of reinforcing factors are being captured in Wheeling, where there's also really amazing things happening. And what Silicon Valley and the Research Triangle, right, and even the city of Miami more recently have figured out is they want to attract venture capitalists, outside investors by doing this. I hate this word because it's hard to say, but it's called agglomeration. It's the idea that if you put these resources together, right? If you put the entrepreneurs together, right, and you basically put the suppliers together, and you basically put everything you need to build an innovation ecosystem relatively closely together, it makes it easier to basically bring in investors, right, who only have to essentially go to one part of the state to make some of those investments. And so it's definitely the innovation economy, right? But the thing is, you're already having bits and pieces of this all over the state. And so the next piece is really just making sure that you're intentional, right, in how you're marketing the state, right? I think actually a big part of what Reggie and I feel like is because we've been here so many times, we just feel like one of the gap is marketing. But if you are going out to Silicon Valley and you're telling investors that you have these amazing cybersecurity companies, that you have the Virgin Hyperloop, that company NeuroWired, that's basically going to help, help people like use their brain signals better. Like these are amazing technologies. These are technologies that don't even exist in Silicon Valley and people just don't know that, right? And all of them are more or less in certain parts of the state. And to be able to bring, all you got to do is just tell the investors they're there. And a lot of that, it has to do with agglomeration and cluster formation.
And if you'll indulge me, Reggie, I've got one for you. On one of your slides, you showed what appeared to be it was a change in gigawatt hour power generation, and it looked like in one of them you had predicted perhaps that in that was that one, I think, the previous one. It looked like in maybe 2024 that there was going to be roughly 35 gigawatt capacity reduction in coal. So that's 2 years from now. Why?
So the question is, with the big increases that we see in the near side of the graph, why are we seeing that, and particularly in 2024 where we see the big drop? Utilities around the country are retiring their coal. It's unfortunate. It largely is driven by that natural gas expansion. They're replacing it with mostly gas and some renewables where they can, but the near-term retirements are because of age. That's the driving factor, is age. And then why aren't they rebuilding coal? It's because of the economics.
Well, so I understand the trend, but if I could follow up there, I mean, that is a hugely pronounced. I mean, that's 30, 34 or something, and it was down 5 or maybe 4, the year before that, and so on and so forth. I mean, that's a huge spike. So what is the data point that gives you a predictor that would say 2024 we're losing 15 times what we lost the prior year?
Yeah, so it would really have to do with age and when these were built. It is a prediction, and I wouldn't take the particular year to year, but just what is high level happening across the industry. So if you think these are 60-year assets, a lot of them were built in the 60s. And so when you get to 2024, they're 60, 65 years old. That's really why it's spiking in the near term.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any last questions? Mr. Speaker?
Reggie, Christine, thank you very much. I appreciate all the time and work you put into this, but I want to just hear your perspective on, you're obviously bullish on natural gas. And many of us in the room are too. We know that that's a big sector of our economy today. We expect it to be a big sector of our economy for the future. But I think about things like, I read it very quickly, but it looked to me like the Wall Street Journal reported a story just this morning that the SEC fined BlackRock for inadequate ESG disclosures on climate. So that trend is not going to stop. Talk about that. How does that factor into your analysis? Where does that fall on your decision calculus for being bullish on natural gas?
Yes. So the question is, why are we bullish on natural gas when financial institutions like the SEC recently fined BlackRock for not having proper ESG disclosures, and that trend is expected to continue? So there's a couple things. One, that's why I mentioned RSG. That is how companies can do the ESG disclosures. The regulation that we may see is more around disclosure, not actually changing anything, but just being able to count or quantify your carbon impact, essentially. That's what the RSG allows companies to do. And so that's why I wanted to highlight that, because then whoever buys that gas, whoever uses that gas will know how many trees they need to plant to offset that, or how much renewable energy they need to buy to offset that. So that's one thing. The second thing is just reality. Reality is we all need firm power. So as much as people might want to regulate out fossil fuels, you need firm power, or civilization does not run, right? Our country does not run. Nowhere in the world runs. So I would say maybe try to turn down some of the noise with a lot of the media and just what you might see in headlines. But gas is we're going to need natural gas. The only thing that could, which is actually being a piece that is developing here in West Virginia, is the hydrogen economy and then batteries. Those things are expected to chip away at gas really after about 20 years from now. But for what we have today and what we need to build today, it's natural gas, just reality.
Thanks for being in West Virginia.
Thank you.
For having us.
One more question. Delegate Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This can kind of be for either or, but my question as we were talking about this and going over, and you kind of touched on it with like the silica and the process, but like could also supplementing, the jobs lost from the coal mining industry could that be supplemented with, production, manufacturing of these new industries, solar and wind, geothermal, the manufacturing those pieces and components here in West Virginia? How could that look? And how could we facilitate that?
Yeah, I'll talk about the macro trend. Question is around building in jobs in coal country more in solar manufacturing and wind manufacturing. I think so one, yes, that's the short answer, particularly in battery manufacturing that will go into electric vehicles, but then also the electric motor. West Virginia makes electric motors, and being able to expand that to feed wind turbines that are going to go in across the world, that is an opportunity. Yes, so I do see the vertical integration piece there. I think it is a bit limited because of the topography. And some of these large companies, if you think of Tesla, for example, they need lots of flat land to build those gigafactories. That will be hard to bring to West Virginia because of the topography. But you can focus on other manufacturers. There's one that is planning to come here. We learned about through Vantage Ventures in batteries. So you will get a piece of it, but maybe not the biggest chunk of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the job component here too, because, okay, a lot of slides. Let me just go back to, wait,
You went wrong.
no. Wait, where's your wind turbine technician slide? Okay.
Oh.
Okay, so I made a point earlier about the fact that traded jobs, the wages are 70% higher. Like, it's not just about jobs in general, it's about higher quality, more transferable jobs. Like, these are the types of jobs that will keep like your kids and your grandkids in West Virginia. It's about creating opportunity, bring folks like Matt home. Sorry, Matt, to put you on the spot, but this is about high paying jobs that's separate from just, learning how to extract the coal. It's about learning how to build services around energy. We had a slide about how the second and fifth fastest growing jobs are energy services. So it's not just about extracting the natural assets. It's around building technology, using data science, engineering, right, to support the energy economy around wind turbines and solar voltaic installers. And so there could be a state of the world where partnering with universities, partnering with these amazing like companies like Hino Motors and Toyota that have these expertise, you train the skilled workforce here in West Virginia, and the rest of the country comes here to gain that expertise.
I think we've reached our time limit. I want to thank the entire team for coming and your willingness to reach out and come to West Virginia. I think everybody appreciates the nice insight. I will have the Harvard team stick around. I know there's offline questions, so please reach out to them and continue this discussion. If there's no further business to come before the Technology Committee, I look for my co-chair for a motion. Motion is to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. We're adjourned.